I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's June 26th, 2023. We're in the Aldermatic Chamber, and it is 7 p.m. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman John Sullivan,
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly,
She was supposed to be in Zoom. Go ahead.
Alderman Ernest Jettie,
Here.
Alderman June Karen,
Here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire,
Here.
Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien Sr. is present, and our Chairman Richard A. Dowd.
Present.
Also in attendance is Matt Sullivan, Director of Community Development.
Okay. First item on the agenda is public comment. Seeing we have no public, I'll skip that. Communications.
From one communication from Lisa Photo, Director of Public Works. Reason, referral to the Board of Aldermen on R-23123 and R-23-128.
There being no objection, I will accept the communication and place it on file. Unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R-23126, establishing an expendable trust fund to accept donations for Nashua Multicultural Festival. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
The motion on the floor is to recommend final passage to the full board of R-23-126. Discussion? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you very much. I don't know if the people that sponsored this are here that could speak to it. I was just curious kind of what the impetus behind it was. Before I reviewed the agenda, I think everybody on this committee knows that I had sent an email out about expendable trust funds, how many there are, why we have them, how we can spend them, how we fund them. So I just had some questions around that. Not sure if there's anybody here to do it. I will, I'll show my hand. Just to be transparent, I'm not at this point willing to support this, only because we have a city events expendable trust fund right now, 7583, that has a good sized balance in it of $26,899. That's as of the latest financial statement. So I was thinking why we couldn't just pay for this festival. Nothing against the festival. I think a festival is fine. I think it's a great cause. I think it would be good for the city. However, my concern about setting up another trust fund, is it funded from the general fund? How is it done? Just adding another list to all of the trust funds that we have in this city is my concern.
Just one thing. Somebody will speak to it. This is only to accept donations, not funded from the city. Alderman Wilshire?
Thank you. There are times when people want to donate money to a certain thing. They don't want it to go to the general fund or to city buildings or city parks. Someone might just want to donate money to this cause, and that's why the expendable trust fund. I mean, we could put it in another account, but then there's nothing that says it has to be used from that account.
Okay.
I mean, that's basically, it's like a nonprofit organization. If you have money, if you receive money from a donor and says, I want to put that money towards your playground, we have to spend the money towards that playground. We can't use it for operating. We can't use it for a new widget. It has to be to that playground. So I get why people do this. They only want to send money if it's going to be used for that purpose.
Could I follow up with a question?
Follow up?
So what you're saying is in order to do that, basically you're setting up a savings account that's specifically for this. I mean, you couldn't take donations, put them in the general fund, and then have the event.
Man,
Yes.
it's really hard to keep track of that if it's in the general fund. That's why the expendable trust funds are set up. I mean, like the snow expendable trust, the police overtime expendable trust, that's why those are set up that way. Because when the money is needed for that, it's there. You don't have to go looking in the budget for it somewhere or using other monies from other accounts, so.
Okay.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, I want to echo, you know, what was stated by Alderman Wilshire. And I appreciate Alderman Sullivan's concerns, but let's look at the history of this board. In the past, Nashua has gone through some pretty lean years, and yet there's been years such as this year were not so lean, you know. So how can you guard something that really gives, like, the general public, the citizens of Nashua, something to, you know, celebrate and stuff like that, when you have a board that really has their thumb down on the budget for that particular, you know, that year? And it cannot be done, particularly if it's got to come out of the general fund. So when you have something like the expendable trust, maybe that might assist a worthwhile project such as this to go on for that particular year, you know, and not to rely on somebody that's really trying to watch all the beans in the jar, you know, let's say. So to me, I would support it.
Okay.
Alderman Wiltshire, follow up?
Well, yeah, and I agree that what Alderman Sullivan brought up at a prior meeting, that we should take a look at all these expendable
Right.
trust funds at some point, have a meeting just to discuss those. Get the people in here who set them up or who who are authorized to expend those funds and, you know, take a look at all of them. So I'd be supportive of that.
Alderman Clee? Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree. I agree with exactly what was said, that we do need to look at all of them, who's overseeing them, et cetera. But I think in this particular case where it's donations, and usually it's citizens' donations or perhaps a charitable organization that is giving to this, and you do want to reassure them through full transparency that their monies are going to be used for that particular thing. It very specifically says in the analysis that it's a trust fund for donations. It doesn't say that it would be funded through any other kind of funds and so on. So, and I've learned in the past, even from my own county, I put money aside for vacation, and then a leaky roof comes up, and I have to pull from that account to do this. But if I have a vacation account, I know how much money I've taken out of there to do this. And in this case, we couldn't do that. We would have to leave that particular money there. It gives full transparency to those that have donated, as well as to the citizens. And if they see us putting a multicultural festival on, and something isn't happening, we can say to them, we can still do this because we have these funds that have been earmarked for that through donations, not through your tax dollars. And I think that makes it a really good thing to have a kind of a trust fund. It reassures the public that we're not willy-nilly using their money. So, thank you.
Yes, Alderman Sullivan?
And maybe a legal question, but it says here that that this fund would be funded by donations for that specific purpose. However, there is no language in here that states, and this is my question, because it doesn't state that it will not be funded through the general fund, is that amiss? You understand what I'm saying? So because it doesn't say for future boards that come along that say, oh, we want to put some money from the general fund in here, it doesn't specifically say that. So does that, I guess, not really handcuff a future board, but does it allow the future board to do that?
I'm not an attorney. We do have one I'm going to ask in a minute. But I would say with the lack of that language, that it could not be funded by revenue unless additional action was taken by the Board of Aldermen. And the only person that has authority to spend is the mayor.
No, I understand
And
that.
you know, I've talked to you, I fully agree with some of these have to be looked at, they're old, they haven't been touched, and we probably need to clean some of them up. But in the past, there have been instances where these were, I won't say misspent, but they were taken into the general account when it was specifically earmarked for something specific. And that's why they came up with these expendable trusts and tried to be very specific about how they get funded and who has the authority to spend. So in this instance, it's by donations, and the only one that has authority to spend it is the mayor.
Mhm.
Attorney Jettie, do you want to give a legal opinion?
No, I do not.
Wise move.
Blame you. I don't blame you.
Oh, smart man.
I hope Attorney Bolton is listening. So I am an attorney, but I'm not the city's attorney, so I would not,
Okay, that's fair.
but
Yes.
I do have a question
Sure.
when it's my turn. Is it my turn?
Good.
So perhaps it would be helpful if someone could tell us what the Nashua Multicultural Festival is, who sponsors it, when does it occur, what does it consist of? Yeah, maybe would help if we had a better understanding of what we're talking about.
I believe that this legislation was initially enacted by the mayor. Does anybody have any additional background on it? I think it has to do with a welcoming city type of thing, and I don't have any additional information. I also don't think it's time sensitive if we wanted to table it till somebody is here. Several people sponsored it, but I think Alderman Timmons, was she involved in that? Oh, and we have a pop-up answer.
We have a volunteer.
for anything.
Well, I don't want to hold up the Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director for the city. I had an opportunity to attend the festival last year. Last year it was held at the Gurley Park area near the band shell there, but this year it will be held at the library pavilion on September 10th of 2023. And generally, whoever made the comment, it is connected to the mayor's Welcoming City initiative, but it's really a celebration of all of the diverse cultures across the city of Nashua. And the way those are celebrated is through a mix of food and dance and art, in general, just community building. And so if you were to attend the event, you'd see a variety of booths, nonprofits and other community organizations looking for membership. June, I think I saw you at the festival last year, all intended to be sort of building their membership and building connections across the community. And so it's a bit of a hard festival to describe, but you'll see every form of entertainment at this thing. One thing that stuck out to me is just sort of the dancing and the music piece of it, but there's different food options as well. Again, celebrating diverse cultures across the community. So I know it's not very specific, but it's a pretty broad event that takes place every year.
So it sounds like we should probably move it along. Also, since it's only by donations, there's no money involved at this point. Yes, Alderman Karen.
Alderman Carroll, thank you.
I got it right.
I think it's, yes, thank you. I think it's also part of the Cultural Connection Committee that Alderman Timmons is on. And it is part of that group that is trying to bring different factions of the city together and to see what they have. You had that music school, they had some great dancing, the food was unbelievable there. So I think that's what this is part of. So, the donations come in from those groups to offset that event. And thank you, Director Sullivan. I will mark the date for the seniors to be there.
Any further discussion on this? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, I certainly don't want to, it sounds like a wonderful thing, and I certainly don't want to cause any problems. But, in no offense to the people who have spoken, but I hear the expression, I think it's this. you know, which, you know, I don't know if the person who said that is just a way of talking, or, I mean, do you know that it is that, or do you?
Yes, because that whole group, Alderwoman Timmons' group was there. That's the ethnic, I mean, they have Cultural Connection Group Committee that meets once a month, and they try to bring different groups in for events. Like they're working with the senior center to do a Hispanic program over at the senior center to bring that in the Indian families. And they invited the senior center because they are a group, you know, a group of people that are diversified and want to see what is going on within the city. So she wouldn't have put her name on this if she felt it wasn't. I know they changed this name 15 times since I've been around. So, but yes, when Director Sullivan talked about Grilly Park, I said, oh, that's what that is. That's what they called it. So I don't see a problem. I mean, if you want to table it, but you only meet once a month in July and August.
That's right.
And if they're doing this in September 10th, might not give you enough time.
Yeah, because we'll, next budget's the end of July, and then if we went back to the full board that only meets once in August, now you're getting awfully close. But it's definitely a thing, because we've already had one, and they got another one scheduled, so it's not speculative. It's a real event.
Right, and I think I think this has been going on for
Yes,
3 or 4 years at least.
yes.
So, I don't know if they have any money in this account.
Not in this account, we haven't,
Not yet.
haven't put it together yet.
No,
Alderman
but
Sullivan?
they might
Well, my
have money
question is if-
aside.
I mean, before it was a year, now it's 3 or 4 years, so how do we pay for it in the past?
I don't know, I would assume it was done by donations, but individually, and somebody had to keep track, and I think they want to have a, if I were speculating, I would say they want to streamline the process so they have one place for the money to go, so they can set it aside and not have to worry about somebody handling it. Any further discussion? Yes, Alderman Como.
Yes, thank you. So this is just speculation, so take that for what it's worth, but we're not appropriating any money into this, it's just creating the account. But I imagine that for the mayor to suggest such a thing, either somebody, I would guess somebody has, you know, suggested that they're prepared to make a donation, or he might know of people who'd be interested in making a donation and just a precursor to accepting that money. But where we're not appropriating anything into it, it's just kind of opening the account. I don't see the harm.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also, too, don't see any harm, because I think, like Alderman Wilshire said, Alderman Sullivan brings up a good point. I think in the future, we're gonna look at all the expendable trust funds. And if we just pile one more onto the mix, you know, that could be judged and weighed and vetted as the other ones at the particular time. I mean, there's no age requirement or anything else like that, so any questions could be answered. But with one pending coming in the future, if this assists the event, then I think we got a way to balance to look. If we're gonna support these multicultural events, this might be the right venue to do so, and to let it go through this year, so, thank you. And then we could look at a later date.
Sure.
On your concerns, which I agree with,
Yeah.
you know, we should,
Yeah.
you know.
So if there's no further discussion?
Oh, yeah, it does.
I do, I just
Oh,
say.
yes?
Well, it's interesting, because tonight, we're adding 2 to the list. We're adding 2 trust funds to the list. And my other,
We haven't got there yet.
not to be flip, but when you said we're gonna look at other trust funds, I said, do you promise that we're gonna look at them? Because I'd really like to look at them.
Oh, I think it came out of Alderman Wilshire's mouth, and she is El Presidente, so I think, you know, I'll work with you on that, and we could bring it up, and, you know, and like Alderman Wilshire stated at this particular meeting, maybe it's its own separate meeting to take a look at it, and it seems to be a lot of questions Maybe expendable trust funds will exist. It's just we don't have the complete information on all of them, why they do exist.
Yeah.
And then once we get deep into the weeds, we'll probably find out this is a darn good idea.
Yeah.
So
All right.
evidently, at one time, it was a good idea.
Sure.
That's why they funded it.
Yep,
So I've already talked to John Griffin about setting something up, so that's gonna happen.
great.
All right, there's no further, Alderman Jettie?
So one last thing. So like I said, I don't want to do anything to, threaten this. It sounds like a worthwhile thing I don't want to do anything to harm it in any way whatsoever. But, this is another example of I'm gonna pick on the administration because this is the administration that's putting this forth. They send things to us and they don't send anybody here to explain to us what it is they're asking for. And, I've talked about this, and I think other aldermen have talked about this in the past. It's unfair to us to just send this piece of legislation to us without anyone here to explain it, without anyone to, answer our questions. And, I'm certainly not gonna do anything to harm this event. But if you could ask the administration, so when this comes before the full Board of Aldermen, if they could please have somebody here to explain to us what this is all about and answer the questions we've asked tonight. That would, certainly be helpful, and in the future, if you could please, whoever sends us something, I hate to give you more work, Mr. Chairman, but if you could make sure that they know that they should have somebody here, because otherwise we're gonna, maybe, if they don't send people to support what they're asking for, maybe we won't pass it. And so,
Okay.
thank you.
If there's nothing else, motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of the full board of R 23-126. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Also before us this evening is R 23-127, approving the cost items of a sidebar agreement between the Nashua Board of Police Commissioners and the 5 Nashua Police Department unions regarding a police department recruiting incentive. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to recommend final passage.
Motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 23-127. Now, I will say that I got a call from the chief this afternoon asking if they could not send somebody because they're stretched. And did I think they were gonna have any problem with this? We've talked about this before. It's all being funded within their own budget, and it's an incentive to get more police officers, so I didn't think it was something that we needed to debate any further than what we've done already in the past, because we have talked about it. Alderman Wiltshire?
I believe they brought it up at the budget
Yeah.
hearing.
I did.
Yeah.
So, any other discussion? Alderman Sullivan?
I was just gonna say, I do remember them talking about it. The information that they provided in the packet was pretty thorough. And I did see that I endorsed it because, not only because it's the police, not only because we need more police on the street, but this is actually a really good idea. It works in the private sector beautifully. It really turns everybody in your company into a recruiter. And it works really, really well.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Also before us this evening is R 23-128, relative to the acceptance of an electronic scoreboard located at Murray Field, donated to the city by the Kyle Bettinger Memorial Trust, and establishing an expendable trust fund related to the scoreboard funded by appropriations. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, the motion is to recommend final passage of, R 23-128. Alderman Wiltshire?
We did have amended version on our desk this evening, so I'd like to make a motion to amend resolution 23-128.
The motion on the floor is to amend R 23-128 with the copy that was provided on our desk this evening as the final resolution. Alderman Clee?
I'm just going to speak briefly too, but Alderman, excuse me, Como is truthfully the person that this was originally brought to. The
Is this
reason
on the amendment or you want to wait till the final?
I think we need to talk the amendment. The amendment changes the original one, and that's what you want me to talk to, correct?
Yep.
Okay. The reason for the amendment is the original one. We had an agreement with the group of individuals, stakeholders, I'll call them, and we came up with a particular split, and we used that split for up to $10,000. And in conversation afterwards, and again, I would like Alderman Como to speak to it as well. We decided that there's always the potential that there won't be the $10,000, and it was necessary to split any kind of funding that came in for this. So that's what the change to the original one was relative to it. We can speak for the need of this entire R23-128 once you approve the amendment. And if possible, I would like Alderman Como to speak as well.
Certainly. Alderman Como?
Yes, thank you. Just to add on to what Alderman Clee was just talking about, we did have a great many meetings with the stakeholders, with Public Works, and the original legislation is basically the agreement that we took out of that meeting. And the proposed amendment is what most of us all consider to be a much more equitable split. Alderman Clee and I both agree. Public Works also agrees with the amendment. It just basically ensures that all the parties involved will get an equal share of the revenue that the scoreboard will generate. And so that's why we believe that the amendment is a much more fair version of the legislation. And like I said, it does have the support of Public Works. It has the support of both of us as sponsors. And so we would appreciate moving forward with the amendment.
Any other discussion? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So when you say all the stakeholders, or I forget, is that the word you use?
Yes.
Yes.
Stakeholders will have an equal share, but I see 45% to Cal Ripton, 45% to Greater Nashville Little League, and 10% to the Expendable Trust Fund Park Rehabilitation. That doesn't sound equal to me.
If I may.
Yes, Alderman Como?
We're referring to an equal split between Cal Ripken and Nashville Little League. And then we also wanted a small portion of the revenue to go into the Expendable Trust Fund for park rehabilitation, just so that Parks and Recreation has a small stream of revenue to make minor improvements to all the ball fields in the city, things like planting seed and bringing in dirt for the infields and things like that, just a small stream of revenue in addition to what will be going to the two major baseball leagues.
May I add to that?
Well, I don't know if he's done yet.
I am.
No, I
thank you.
just wanted to add to help, if that's okay
Okay.
with you, Alderman Jettie.
I'm done, so go ahead.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's up to the chairman.
just to add on to what Alderman Como said, the equitable, if you look at the original one, it was 55-45, but not until you get to the $10,000. And that meant at some point that Little League might not get anything. And we just felt that it wasn't equitable, even though it's sitting in the Cal Ripken field, through certain circumstances and so on. It was best that we looked at it as that give to this, give to that, and as he said, the 10%. The city now takes care of the fields, at least at that particular field, which didn't happen before. And now it's not going to come out of the taxpayers. There's actually going to be revenue that'll be generated to reduce the taxpayer input to it. So I think it's a true win-win without the city making a grab for all that revenue. It guarantees that it goes to those leagues.
I can tell you, having talked to the park rec manager, they need every penny they can get.
It's true.
including people too. Yes, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. Looking at the, I guess it'd be the second paragraph, how the city will put out to bid the space on the back of the scoreboard and enter into contracts for advertising on the back of the scoreboard. How does that work? You know, you put it out to bid, obviously there's maybe an RFQ process that goes out, highest bidder gets it? Is it scheduled out? Is it, you know, how does the city, a lot of questions coming, I'm sorry, but does the city have the right to refuse an advertiser? Maybe there's content on the board that they don't feel is appropriate or whatnot. Can the city put the stop sign up?
I can address that. Yes, it does. There's, any contract that goes forward has to be approved through legal, and if they find something that's offensive or not allowed by city ordinance, or they will not allow it. And we do this all the time.
Okay.
School department does it all the time, put out RFPs. And
Yep.
Any other questions? No? Let's see, I think we're still voting on the amendment. So all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now looking at the amendment, the full amended legislation. Alderman Clooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a lot of discussion as to whether or not we would just put all this money into Public Works or General Fund, or if we would create an expendable trust fund. And I think the truth of the matter is, much like the previous discussion, the only way of being able to allow our accounting and finance people and complete transparency was to have that revenue go into a trust fund where they could see would be split appropriately and so on, and there wouldn't be any controversy about it. This particular sign, as it was donated, the proper methods weren't followed. It was donated more to Cal Ripken and not to the city as it should have happened. We're righting that wrong by now accepting it and putting out the contract and not hurting Cal Ripken at the same time. That was one of the concerns, was that the people donating it wanted to do what they could to help the Cal Ripken League. And while we think that's admirable, it wasn't done in the proper procedure. So we're fixing that and still not hurting Cal Ripken. The problem was that the contract also went out at what we all feel is quite low. And it was a perpetual contract. I think I said that properly, meaning that it went on forever. And that was also, plus it's on a state highway and no one asked for permission. So the state kind of came knocking at our door and said, how dare you have this advertising and this lighted signage and you don't have the permit? And we went, what sign? So it started a lot of it. I think that's how Alderman Como got involved. It is in my ward, which is how I got involved. We're trying to right the wrong. And in the meantime, we're trying to find out how we can get the best of funds. And as Alderman Sullivan brought up, you know, the highest bidder that is appropriate for a child's ball field and the neighborhood, because it faces the neighborhood. Right now, the sign that there is perfectly lovely, really upstanding, good citizen and business of the city. And, you know, just sadly, it could do better and it could do more. And that's kind of where we started this conversation. And at the same time, did not want to hurt the Cal Ripken League. So we want to make sure that they got money, but at the same time benefit Little League too. Why should they not get it just because they don't have a field and a benefactor of such nature? They're a field that does it. And we've already kind of talked about this split, but that's how this kind of came about. And we're really just trying to right that wrong and make it come into the city properly.
So 2 points. This legislation is going to keep John Griffin's accounting very simple because it's all in this, you don't have to worry about taking money out of the city somewhere else. Also, I don't know how effective that sign is. Until this legislation came up, I never noticed it.
I will tell you, if I may, I did notice it, and what I truly admire the person whose name is on that, and And they lighted the sign too, and they did a beautiful job of, I noticed it. I did not realize that it was illegal and the city wasn't part of it. I did not get a complaint from your, I believe it's your ward or Ward 4, from across the street on it. So I never thought anything of it, but I did notice it, and it is definitely very attractive too.
Okay, any additional comment, Alderman Como?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of brief things to add on to that. I wanted to give some quick background for those that hadn't been involved in the whole process. But basically what happened was the Kyle Benninger Trust donated this scoreboard to Cal Ripken to put up at their field. And after they installed it, they asked permission from Parks and Rec to do some advertising on the back of it. And this was a couple of years ago. The people involved are no longer with the city, but they gave Cal Ripken permission to do this, when it turns out that they didn't really have the authority to do so because it's on Amherst Street, which is a state highway. So the state, raised a stink about it. Somebody from Cal Ripken approached me about how we could go about getting a permit, which is kind of how we started the whole conversation, and that's when we started expanding the scope of that discussion to the idea that, yes, Cal Ripken does play at this park, but it is a city-owned field, and because it's a city-owned field, if we were to keep this, it's gonna have to be something that the city maintains and manages, and since the city would be managing it, it only made sense that it was something that benefited more than just the one organization, because while it's true that Cal Ripken does play there now, that's not always necessarily going to be true. The leagues, change hands of fields quite regularly depending on the size of the league and the usage. Several years ago, Cal Ripken was in charge of LaJoy, and based on registration numbers and things like that, LaJoy was transferred over to National Little League. So there's no guarantee that next year or the year after that, it'll still be Cal Ripken playing on that field. So because the city, it's the city's field and they allow Cal Ripken to play there, the city needs to make sure that, it benefits both of the leagues equally and that we cover all of our bases legally as far as how to get it properly permitted with the state and things like that. So this should close all of those loops on things that should have been done initially that, some people didn't realize needed to get done. This will make it fully legal, it'll protect everybody, and it's overall just a good thing for youth baseball in general in the city, and it's gonna benefit a lot of kids that wanna play baseball.
Okay, there's no further comments. Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you. So, I had these questions before, but now that I hear the discussion, I have even more questions. So is this sign, is this the same sign that's there already? It's not gonna,
Right.
we're not talking about a new sign?
If I may?
Yes, Alderman Como?
Correct, yes. So the scoreboard was installed, I want to say either 3 or 4 years ago, and the advertising has been on the back of it ever since about 6 months after the scoreboard went up. So the advertising is there, it's lit. It's actually a really nice billboard. It's a good location. It gets a lot of vehicular traffic. It gets a lot of eyeballs on it. But it is already there. This isn't going to add anything to it. It just kind of closes the loops with permitting and permissions and things like that.
Okay.
Well,
So maybe-
follow-up?
Follow-up. So has the sign been permitted by the city? There's a sign ordinance that requires that there be a permit for a sign.
I think we have to accept it first. Alderman Como?
I don't know if it is permitted. I would defer to Director Sullivan.
Well, I would venture to guess that it can't be permitted till we own it. At least not by us, anyway.
Matt Sullivan, I can't answer that question actually right now. I can certainly get back to the committee with that response. I don't know if the sign was permitted. I think it partially predates me perhaps, but I can find out and report back. Alderman Jettie, I just don't know. Sorry.
Alderman Cleen?
I'm gonna use the I think word, but I'm pretty sure that I think, I do believe that we talked, and that it is not permitted as far as the city is concerned. It did not go through planning, it did not go through anything like that. When Cal Ripken got the advertiser, and the way that happened was that the person whose name is on it did all the lighting and so on, and out of respect for them, they put up the signage. We can't go and ask for this to be permitted from planning until it is ours. we could have forced them to go and say, okay, shut the lights off and go do the permitting process. That's probably what could have happened, but trust me, Alderman Como and I have been working on this for well over a year, just trying to get us to here. The next phase would have to be, I believe, it is advertising, which is still signage. So I think it would probably, possibly still have to go to planning, but I can pretty much so assure that it has never gone there either through Cal Ripken or definitely not through the city, to the best of my knowledge.
All set, Alderman Jennings?
No, I'm not, so I'm well familiar with, with the sign. I mean, I've driven by it. I've been to games at the field. I've seen the scoreboard, and I've seen, the sign on the back. And, the question, I'm fairly active in my own ward about this sign and enforcing the sign ordinance. And, this is not my word, but the question arose in my mind, as to, is this your word? Or?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Mhm.
So the question arose in my mind as to whether or not, and is this part of the historical district as well?
No, it is not part of the
Okay.
historic district. Actually, Homan Stadium, to the best of my knowledge, is not actually part of the historic district either. It goes up, almost up to there. I think there's multiple streets like where the fire station is and so on. It doesn't go much beyond that. So no, it is not part of the historic district, so they don't have to meet any of those requirements. But as far as the signage is concerned, this truly just kind of popped up and it became like white noise every time I particularly drove by it, and others. And I think I've talked to people even here on the board about this particular sign and so on, and we get the same comments from everybody. Oh, that's a really nice sign. But I don't think any of the steps were followed, from it coming to the city to getting the permits and so on. And that's why I'm saying the word think, but I'm pretty much so reassured that no, none of that has happened. So I do appreciate that question. That would be something that has to get done probably before we can even put out an RFP.
Alderman Como?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to apologize to Director Sullivan. The English language is a tricky thing. When I said permitted, I didn't mean having a permit. I'm almost positive that that's not the case. What I was asking Director Sullivan was whether this type of signage was allowed under current ordinance, or whether it was something that was going to require, a variance or something like that. I don't know what the regulations are around lit billboards and, where we can put them and things like that. So when I said permitted, I meant to be
Allowed.
permitted. Yeah, allowed, pretty much. So I apologize. I wasn't asking you if they had a permit. I don't know if it's something that is going to require additional steps, or whether what we do tonight will be sufficient to allow it.
Again, I'm pretty sure, and Mr. Sullivan can verify, but I don't think the city can permit a sign that we don't own,
Correct.
correct? Till after this legislation's passed?
I respectfully, Mr. Chair, I would disagree with that. The city, and I think I need to be clear about which permit I'm using here. There's the permission of the zoning ordinance, which can be applied at any point in time, regardless of whether the city accepts it or not. But any sign, whether private, nonprofit, public, municipal, state, does require the filing of a sign permit with the city. And so I think there's an opportunity here to, work on ensuring that our signs are appropriately submitted and permitted through the zoning department. But Mr. Chair, I also can't speak to, and this is my own, I'm a little embarrassed here. I don't know the sign particularly well, and so I apologize for not being able to answer the question of whether or not it meets the zoning regulations, but I can certainly look into it.
So I know that other people could have permitted the sign, but the city can't permit a sign that they want to permit unless they own it. Anybody else can if they own it.
Understood.
But we can't permit something we don't own.
Understood, and I agree. Yes, Mr. Chair.
In that
Yep.
context.
Yep, understood.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Just-
amplifying information?
Yes. I really am, I'm not going out on a limb here, but the fact that they didn't get state permission, I'm gonna try to get away from the word permit, they didn't get state permission, although they did speak to someone from the city Parks and Recs and felt that they were doing all the right things, it was just a, yes, you can do it. It wasn't a, yes, you can do it, but then you've got to go to zoning board or whatever to get the permissions for the sign. So I don't feel like I'm going out on a limb. And I want to reiterate that because the city doesn't, technically, we haven't taken it and accepted it, we're not going to go and get that until that happens. I really feel very confident. They did not do that. I do feel that they have to do that. So I don't think it's just allowed to put up a sign. I think they have to ask for the zoning or whichever board it is that this would fall under, so.
Okay.
That's why I want to reiterate that, no, none of this has happened through any of the appropriate boards.
If there's no other comments, yes?
So is this resolution simply, accepting the donation of this sign and, agreeing that, or I guess accepting the donation of the scoreboard and agreeing that the advertising on the back of the sign is going to be put out to bid, and then the revenue is going to be distributed in accordance to this. This, I guess this is not saying that the sign is, conforms to the, the sign ordinance. That's another step, and
No, it'll still have to go through the steps.
so.
If I
can
may.
ask Director Sullivan?
Yep.
So now that this is
I'm listening.
okay.
I'm researching.
So now that this has come up, will you be asking the code enforcement to look at the sign and see whether or not it's complies and ensuring that the proper steps are followed for the permitting of the sign? I mean, I want to make sure that all, that the people in charge of this thing all of a sudden, don't turn this thing into a electronic messaging thing, so that it violates the sign ordinance, and that we have that they somehow think that this is permission to do anything they want there.
Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To respond to the question, I think to address Alderman Jetti's first question, I believe the action before you this evening is simply to accept the sign, and I would agree with you that, or I'm not sure if you were saying this, but I would say that acceptance of the sign as property does not imply that it fully conforms with the zoning ordinance. So I think you can accept it without necessarily certifying that it's compliant. I would say that, yes, it wouldn't actually be directly to code enforcement. It would in fact be to the zoning staff to review whether or not the existing sign is compliant with the zoning ordinance. There are a few things that need to be confirmed here: the width of the right-of-way and where the sign is actually located. Obviously the size of the sign and the typology, but yes, I mean, the first conversation that will need to happen is between zoning and obviously the folks who have the specifications for the sign as it was constructed. We need to have those details to make a determination, but we're happy to do that subsequent to the vote this evening or at a later time, but I can't speak to the compliance this evening, unfortunately.
Okay.
Do we have amplifying
No,
information, or are we?
I actually have a question for Director Sullivan, if that's okay.
All right.
Thank you. My question for you, Director Sullivan, is when this goes to the zoning board as it exists right now, and Public Works then puts out a RFP based on what the sign is right now, before that sign can be, new advertisement can be put on it, does that also then have to go to the zoning board? The reason I'm asking is that this particular board has very integral lights. That's why I keep doing this, because they have like these down lights that go to to the sign, the next person that came in, those lights are specific to the advertiser. It kind of enhances who it is that currently has that advertisement. The next person who comes in might want a different type of light. So if that were the case, that's why I'm asking this
I
question.
think we're getting into zoning now. We're just trying to accept the sign first.
I agree, but I want to add to what Alderman Jetty's concerns are. If this has to, every time an RFP goes out, has to go to, and we're looking at 3 to 5 years on an RFP, so.
Mr. Chair, I believe I can answer the
Director
question. So
Sullivan?
we do not regulate, nor is any municipality across the nation allowed to regulate or make zoning decisions based on the content that's presented upon any type of signage. And so to that end, changing of the entity that's being advertised does not modify how the zoning department would interpret the compliance with the zoning ordinance. That said, if lighting changes, whether that's, up lighting versus down lighting, or the lumens that are used, all of those things do need to be compliant both with the lighting ordinance and with the zoning ordinance. And so if there are changes made to the sign, those would be fully subject to the zoning ordinance regardless of the advertiser, or the entity being advertised, rather.
Thank you. Thank you for
Anyone else?
indulging me.
All right. Thank you, Director Sullivan. The motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R23-128 to the full Board of Aldermen.
As amended.
As amended. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also before us this evening is R23-129. Authorizing the City of Nashua to enter into contracts with the Sauhegan Valley Transportation Collaborative, Nashua Community College, Riviera University, Town of Hudson, and the Town of Merrimack for transit services. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
The motion is to recommend final passage of R23-129 to the full board. And we do have someone here to explain in detail exactly.
We appreciate it.
I didn't think I'd be speaking until now. For the record, Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director for the city, here to address R23-129 relative to the acceptance or approval, rather, of 5 revenue contracts related to the Nashua transit system here in the city of Nashua. If this looks familiar, it is. This is an annual revenue contract consideration that the board undergoes. These are 5 entities that actually use NTS services, whether through regular fixed route services or actually through paratransit services that actually contract with us. And just to give a sense of the financials here, and I've talked to transit financials more at this board than I think you've probably ever heard, but these revenues actually help us buy down the amount of city or general fund match that we're using when we take in the federal transportation formula grants. And so the more revenue on our end, the better off for the city. And so, like any revenue contract, this is a good thing. Just to quickly outline what's contained herein, again, there are 5 entities: 1, Riviera University; the 2nd, Nashua Community College; the 3rd, the Town of Hudson; the 4th, the Town of Merrimack; and lastly, the Sauhegan Valley Transportation Collaborative, known as SVTC. Again, each of these, we provide a unique service to each of these in one way, shape, or form. And these are long-standing relationships, and we're asking only to continue to accept their money, which I hope you have no objections to. But I'm happy to answer any questions about the specifics of the dollar amounts, the hours provided, and perhaps even questions related to service interruptions and the impacts on these contracts. Happy to address any questions you might have.
Any questions? Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. How much? How much do we get typically?
So we basically do these contracts on an hourly basis. They're actually each a little different. So let me walk you through each one. Relative to Riviera, the total contract is actually for $13,000 on the year. The way that service operates, we actually call it a UPass service. Every time a RIV student gets on the bus, they simply show their ID and they're able to ride for free around the community as much as they'd like. That $13,000 is modeled off of what we understand the ridership trends to be. We analyze that every year and reach a sort of a cooperative number with Riviera directly. Nashua Community College is $4,500, and that's what's slightly smaller based on the ridership we've observed there. And again, that's billed over the course of the annual fiscal year. Relative to Hudson and Merrimack, these are actually, they're a per hour charge, and so we sort of have picture this as a not to exceed revenue contract in a sense. The general not to exceed based on our estimates for the town of Hudson is $28,490. That's about 500 hours of paratransit and other service. For the town of Merrimack, it's $38,857, which is about 752 hours worth of service. So those are really paratransit oriented service offerings to those two communities. And then our relationship with Souhegan Valley Transportation Collaborative is complicated for all the very good reasons. We provide a variety of different on-demand and paratransit service to the Milford-Amherst area for groceries and everything that folks need for those that are most vulnerable. We budget about $170,000 of revenue from that contract, but there's a lot of complicated formula funding behind that. The bottom line is that we estimate about $170,000 coming into the cities from SVTC over the annual year.
Okay.
Follow-up?
The monies that you just mentioned for the SVTC for, I think it was that was medical transportation mostly?
It's largely paratransit.
Paratransit.
So disabled individuals that need access to services or, appointments, the grocery store, that kind of thing.
And I breezed through the contract, but that is free to those folks, correct?
So there is, yes, essentially. And this is where my knowledge might end to some extent. I believe there are some trips that do cost the rider money, but the variety of service, the bulk of service is provided gratis, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, thanks.
All set?
Yep.
Any other questions? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, I have a general question, and that is that I'm assuming that the cost of providing this service is less than the revenue that we're receiving.
Yes, that is correct. And to that end, if you were to look in detail at the prior year's contract, the costs were closer, quite frankly, to the revenue being brought in. Sorry, let me restate that. In prior years, the cost of service was near or even above, in some cases, the service that was being provided. And so that was problematic, obviously. Over the last year, Transit Administrator Correa has done an in-depth look at this, looking at all indirect costs, obviously the direct capital costs, maintenance costs associated with all of this service, and has actually increased the hourly rate being billed to a lot of these entities. So as a result, some of the service offering hours have gone down. But again, the objective there was to bring the costs and the revenues closer together while also creating a predictable formula for the future. And so we were providing a larger subsidy in a way in the past. We've now reduced service to an extent while increasing the hourly costs to bring those two numbers closer together. Does that answer your question?
Follow-up?
So when you say closer together, are we getting reimbursed for what it's costing us to provide the service?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
We are. Now, to add a fine point to that, there are some cases where we could have a catastrophic capital failure, and then the formula sort of goes out the window. But we have sort of a loaded hourly cost that's based on our expectations of ongoing capital maintenance and sort of indirect cost. And, it's as good as the numbers that go into it for the most part.
Okay.
All set?
Because if I could just, obviously, we don't want to, we don't want to be burdening the Nashua taxpayers with the cost of providing transportation services to, people in Hudson, Milford, wherever
Yep.
we're happy to provide the service as long as we're reimbursed appropriately. That was my point.
And I think, Alderman Jay, to that point, I completely agree. I think we always have two competing priorities in transit. One, providing, regional service that allows people outside of Nashua to get into the community, but also those in Nashua to get out to employers and other destinations. But we don't want to do that at the expense of the Nashua taxpayer that's contributing to the general fund contribution. Obviously, I'd like to look at it in a way that, the Hudson and the Merrimack taxpayer are also contributing, they're making a payment to the city. But to your point, we would never want a system where it's clearly more balanced in favor of the regional offerings than it is the Nashua offerings, because it is a Nashua service first. So I understand your sentiment, and this is a constant conversation among the transit folks.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Como?
Yes, thank you. Through you to Director Sullivan, I apologize if you answered this earlier, but when you mentioned the service provided to the two schools, you said that a student can show their ID and then ride the bus for free. Is that information like captured and studied so that if ridership for whatever reason went dramatically up or down, next year we could use that data to, adjust what we charge those two schools?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
That's an excellent question, and the answer is not really. Actually, we estimate the ridership from students, and so that's kind of giving me an opportunity to speak to something we're working on right now. We're going to be rolling out some new technology on our buses, everything from Wi-Fi on the buses to actually the ability to count by the fare type, which we, believe it or not, do not have right now. And so when someone shows their badge, we really don't have a good way of documenting what type of pass it is. Even when you show your city ID, by the way, you could all ride the bus for free, if you don't know that already. But you can, I'm sorry. Well, I do sometimes take the bus to work, and I ride for free, so maybe I'm being subsidized, but that's okay. You just show your badge, but unfortunately we do not have a good way of actually tracking that. And so that's something we're gonna be rolling out so the driver can actually just tap and keep tabs on what we're doing. So we really estimate based on our understanding of trends, but to your point, if we were very successful working with any of the entities we're talking about, it gets a little tricky for us to then go back to them and require additional funds. And so that's something we'd like to address through the technology upgrades.
Excellent, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, the staff of the two schools get to ride free too?
Alderman, that's a great question. I don't know the answer for certain, but I believe that they do, assuming that they have an ID badge. But I could certainly get clarification. I don't know the answer.
Curious.
Certainty.
Don't want to hold up the pipeline but just curious.
I'll come
Okay,
back.
any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
You take the bus home now. All right. New business ordinances,
There are none.
tabled, and we're not doing anything tabled. General discussion. Seeing none. Public comment, there is none. Remarks by Alderman. Alderman Como.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank the committee for their support of our 23-128 and its amended version. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? All right. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make the motion to adjourn.
Motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 8:03 PM.